Alright, what's going on everybody? Today I'm going to try to give you a little bit of a tutorial on how to use Kiddion's mod menu to make pretty much any vehicle in the game drift. There are a few that don't really like to be drifted, um, but I'm going to go ahead and just try and give you a basic rundown of the settings, kind of what they do, what I've learned from messing around with them. I don't know 100% what they all are for. I just know from like I said, messing around with them on my own. Obviously here we have an Ocelot Jackal, which would never be able to do something like this, even though this is just a simple little donut. You can see it's got quite a bit of angle there on it. I'll go ahead and throw up a few clips of this thing hitting some pretty cool drifts on the screen now. Alright, so as you guys can see, pretty decent car here. Definitely got some good slides in. I may not be the best drifter in the game, but still pretty good. Really? Get out of here. Anyways, yeah, like I said, pretty good car here, especially once you get into the handling settings and all that stuff. I'm not going to start showing you guys the settings with this car. I will come back in case y'all want to maybe try it out yourself. But I'm going to start out with this one because I haven't modified it just yet. This is a very good car to start out with drifting if you haven't drifted before, and even if you have drifted before, because messing with these settings is quite a bit different than vanilla drifting, if you're familiar with double clutching and stuff like that vanilla drifters use. So I guess we'll go ahead and get straight into it. This is, obviously the Karen Sultan. Everybody should know this car. As you can see, it's got no angle there, and it's not spinning tires. I have not modified it yet. So if we open up our menu, go to Vehicle, first thing I like to do is turn the acceleration up to around 16. This car I'm going to do 18. Acceleration is, how fast the car is going to speed up. Not necessarily how fast the car is going to go, although it's directly tied to how fast the car can go. And then once you're done with that, that's really the only thing on this page that concerns drifting. Also, you can override your speed limit. It's not really a big deal. I've got it set to 1,000, and it just stays on 1,000 over all my cars. And then you go into handling. So for the mass, that's not something you're typically going to have to mess with. You can turn it up if you'd like, if you feel like your car isn't carrying itself through the corners. But typically, like I said, you don't really have to mess with that. Front wheel drive bias, that's going to be, so if you have it set to 0.50, you're going to have equal power to the front wheels, equal power to the rear wheels. All-wheel drive. For most cars that you're going to drift in this game, you don't really want that. You're going to want, at least for my acceleration settings, you're going to want it at 0.05. Just because with the high acceleration, the car will kind of take a while to really get going. So I like to give a little bit of power to the front wheels, not too much so that it doesn't start to kind of correct itself while you're driving or while you're drifting. Um, but yeah, and then upshift and downshift. These numbers are going to change how fast the car shifts. That's not really going to be that big of a deal, but I usually like to set them at about 20, just so that, it doesn't really have shifting. Um, Front wheel brake bias, I don't usually mess with that. It's kind of the same thing as the front wheel drive bias. It's going to change where your brakes go. Um, like I said, I don't usually mess with that. Brake force, obviously, it's how strong your brakes are. I usually like to turn this up to about 10, just because when you are going at higher speeds, you definitely want some better brakes, or else you're just going to take forever to stop. Handbrake force, I usually like to set this at about 16. Just same thing, you're going faster, you're doing crazier things, you're going to want a better handbrake, especially when you're drifting and need to use that handbrake to kind of carry yourself through the drift without using the gas. Initial drive force, I've heard that this is kind of like the how fast the engine is going to rev up. I haven't really noticed that all too much, but I do like to set it at about 1.5. And initial drive gears, this is supposed to be like the amount of gears that the car has, although I haven't noticed much of a difference when you change that. I've set it at 0 before and had the same results as setting it at 10. Um, so I usually don't mess with it. Initial drive max flat velocity, that's going to be the fastest your car can go. Doesn't necessarily mean your car will reach that speed, but I usually like to set it at around 400, just so that there's not any kind of restriction. There's a little bit of an acceleration curve. I've found 400 to be about the sweet spot. Anything higher, anything lower, it's not really going to affect. Anything lower, it's going to kind of slow the car down a little bit, but not really. Like I said, hardly noticeable. Your steering lock, pretty self-explanatory. It's the amount your wheels can turn. So for drifting, most cars I like to set this from 75 up to about 80, 85. You can sometimes go up to 90 if you want to go to the extreme, but that's not really necessary. 80 is a pretty good sweet spot for most cars. And now you can see the wheels turn a lot more. Front wheel traction bias, kind of the same thing as the front wheel drive bias and the front wheel brake bias. You don't really want to mess with this a whole lot, as it can really break things. But basically, it affects the traction per front and rear wheels. So I like to keep it around 50, just so that they're both even. Your traction curve min and your traction curve max. So the minimum is going to be the least amount of traction that you have. So when going around a corner, sliding, that's going to be you're going to be at your minimum grip. And then traction curve max, same thing. It's going to be the maximum traction you can have. So I like to set this at around 2.20. You don't want to set it too high, up to like 5 or whatnot, because going around a corner, if it catches grip, it might straighten the car out, throw off your drift and whatnot. So like I said, I like to keep it around 2.20, just so that when it does catch grip, it's pretty quick to go back into a slide. Suspension force, pretty self-explanatory. It's how strong the springs are, how hard they are, stiff, whatever you want to call it. I like to set it about 3. That's about the maximum. Anything higher, your car will kind of start to bounce around. Not necessarily start jumping or anything like that, but it gets just a little bit more bouncy. Not really something you want drifting, but of course it's up to you. And then these last 4, I usually just set them to 0. Pretty self-explanatory with them, like deformation multiplier. That's going to be, if you bump into something, how much of a dent it makes, blah blah blah, engine damage, all that stuff. So now that we've got it all set up, let's go ahead and try and drift this thing. So I'm just gonna drive straight off of here. Nice. See if I can get out of there. Alright. Oh yeah. That is perfect. Of course, there's not much of anything but straight roads here. But yeah, as you can see, with the settings provided, this thing just absolutely loves it. Come on, move out of my way. But yeah, you can throw some crazy angle with these settings. That steering angle modifier really helps. But yeah, as you guys can see, pretty good drift car here. I hope you guys learned a little bit. Hopefully it helps y'all out. I know a lot of people like to drift on this game, but not many people know how to use this menu. I definitely didn't when I started out, but I just started messing with things and slowly figured it out. So figured I'd help some people out, let everyone know what's up. And I hope I see more people drifting on this game, because it's definitely really fun. I'd like to definitely hit some tandems with some people with similar settings to mine. But I'm going to go ahead and go back to that other car so I can show you all the settings, just in case y'all want to copy them down. Try it out for yourself. Alright, so here we are again, back in this car. Here's the settings. Sometimes your acceleration might reset if you modify the car or anything like that, for instance. But I had this one set to 16 for the acceleration. And then here's the handling settings if you want to pause and copy those down. Sometimes I won't mess with the brake force. It kind of sometimes doesn't matter. A lot of these settings you can kind of mess with yourself, tune them around. You can see here I've got the traction curve min set to 1.8 and the max to 2.4. On that other car I had them at 1.7 and 2.2 respectively. Obviously I haven't messed with these last four either. That's because most of my cars have auto repair and God mode on, so there's no need in the first place. And like I said, these settings really come down to personal preference and how you like to drift. So you can obviously fine-tune those and mess around with them. But if you aren't really sure of what each of the settings mean or how they interact with each other, I recommend only changing one at a time, and then going, trying it out, seeing what the change is, and then tuning it a little bit more. Just so that you don't, if you change too much at once, you're not going to be able to tell what went wrong. You're going to end up with a broken car and it won't drive and you won't know how to fix it. So yeah, just kind of do a little bit of exploration by yourself and just kind of mess around with them and get a feel for what everything means, what everything does, and then from there you can start tuning your own cars. The settings that I showed you on that car are basically what I start with on every car. And then, like I said, kind of fine-tune it once you start driving it. But those settings typically will work on almost any car. There are a few cars in the game that I have found that just don't like to drift, either because they don't handle properly, well, mostly just because they don't handle properly. For instance, the RX-7 they have in the game, terrible. For some reason, it's just really, really, really snappy, like way too snappy. So I can't ever really get that one to drift. Also, some of the tuner cars that they added into the game, they did some kind of a patch to them where the transmission is kind of wonky. So sometimes it'll just not accelerate at all. Like you'll go around a corner and it's like it's bogging down, even if you set your acceleration all the way up and stuff. So just beware that that can happen sometimes with those cars. The newer tuner ones, they did a nerf to them. They were really good at drifting vanilla. From what I heard, I don't usually drift vanilla. Obviously, I prefer this. But then they pulled out a patch where you weren't able to double clutch and all that stuff. So yeah, like I said, I hope to see you guys out here drifting. Hopefully this has taught you guys something, and you know, just kind of mess around with the settings yourself and get a feel for them. And yeah, thanks for watching.